Hello, everyone. Today we are going to continue with a reading from the Masters in Public Administration program at UNC Charlotte. Could be applicable to many audiences, so I'm going to share my summary here. The reading is called Representative Bureaucracy, a leveler to enhance social equity, co-production, and democracy by Norma M. Riccucci and Gregg G. Van Ryzin. This study explores the question, can race, ethnicity, and gender impact how public bureaucrats work, how people working for the government seek to serve their community? A diverse and representative bureaucracy can help promote social equity and democratic principles, is what they end up finding within this paper. Some of the definitions that they use throughout this paper include active representation. This would be when bureaucracies push for the needs and interests of the general population. These needs and interests could impact, the needs and interests of the people within the bureaucracy, their individual backgrounds and experiences could impact what they view as the community's needs. So this would involve seeking out a diverse pool of candidates to represent more fully the population of the community. An overhead bureaucracy is a group that must do whatever elected officials ask them. And symbolic representativeness is the idea that mere existence of passive representation can translate into benefits for citizens. So this idea that if you have people from different backgrounds working on a certain project, that will automatically help those groups of people who are represented to have their voices heard, which of course is not true. People within the same identity group can have very different experiences that prevent them from fully representing one another's needs and wants. To go into a little bit more depth about passive representativeness, this is the easiest way to measure passive representation. The easiest way to measure that is to compare the percentage of people working for a bureaucratic organization and identifying as a minority group to those in the general population identifying the same way. So you might have seen, for example, a statistic showing 51% of United States citizens are women, and then a much lower percentage of Congress people are women. When these proportions are more proportional to the overall population, it's likely because they include these lower level positions within that statistic, because women and people of color are much more likely to be working in lower level positions than in upper level management with policy making capabilities. So some implications for practice if you're trying to increase diversity within your organization is that the argument is that the government should not only work in the names of efficiency and economy, but also in the name of social equities. That's just another principle that they need to keep in mind here. This is very significant for many members of minority communities. For example, African American people typically see government jobs as a symbol of stature, economic power, and social mobility. Governments on all levels have developed social mobility programs aimed at increasing hiring for women, people of color, and people with disabilities. A lot of state governments also host summits for discussing the stigma of hiring people with disabilities and combating that stigma. Overall, hiring diverse staff can help decrease discrimination in the workplace. Most governments have not yet promoted women and people of color to upper level policymaking positions at the same rate that they have promoted white men. So this is an area that still needs some improvement. Racial diversity improves overall organizational performance and job satisfaction. So this is just more reasons to aim for it. But rather than just passive representativeness, we want active representativeness. There has been some research that social origins impact people's values, which can impact policy outcomes. This would be passive representation turning into active representation. A common example is that women are more likely than men to push for programs that would specifically benefit women. So increasing the protection for people identifying with the minority group on police force is another example that has led to less complaints against the police by the general public. To engage with active representation, career government bureaucrats need to have the power and discretion to engage in policymaking. So when we're talking about those lower level employees that we mentioned earlier, like those groups often have more representation from women and people of color, their positions would not really allow for this active representativeness because they don't have as much of a role to engage in this policymaking. Specialization and technological and socially complexity has made bureaucrats important and necessary. Underserved and disenfranchised populations should not be omitted from the political process. One way to make sure that they are not omitted is by trying to hire from a diverse pool of candidates that includes many people from these underserved and disenfranchised populations to consider when hiring for a position. Bureaucratic discretion is important for encouraging active representation, and all segments of society should be represented in government organizations. This is becoming a more common belief, although not necessarily played out in practice at this time as often and as accurately as it should be. Passive representation usually indicates shared experiences, although of course that's not always the case. For example, some shared experiences or ways that people might feel more connected to people with similar backgrounds include that Black students tend to feel more satisfied and included when they attend HBCUs. Veterans in counseling like their experience more when their therapist is also a veteran. And increasing female staff at domestic violence units can increase trust and increase reporting rates. Even something like listing feminine names on a listing of staff for a recycling center inspired more women to focus on recycling. Overall, symbolic representativeness enhances legitimacy and accountability of a bureaucracy. So any kind of representation that you can bring to your organization, it's very important to do so. Bring in as many diverse candidates whenever you interview as you can.